And Eva, of course, if you want to share anything, like very pleased and honored to introduce you, Ewa Wrebska-Dermanovic. She studied philosophy and international relations in Łódź, and she worked at universities of Bayreuth, Bonn, Bochum, where she is now leading a project on using people well and treating people badly. And today she will have a talk on structural injustice, lessons from Kant's Doctrine of Rights. So thank you very much, Eva, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an evening here in Berlin, but I guess it's midday at your place. I will try not to be too long in my talk. And yeah, I guess you would need to completely ignore my background because it's going to be dynamic. All right, let's share my screen. Desktop. Opens, allow Zoom to share. Sorry. Apparently, yeah, okay. All right, escape. And now I still need to set my computer so that it allows me to do that somehow. All right, let's try again.
Or if you want, you can send it to me and I will try to do it.
I have it.
Oh, now it's working.
All right. Okay, but can I actually view it as play from the beginning? Okay. Yeah. Now let me see if I can see my notes to the presentation. I am so sorry that I'm such a non-pro when it comes to Zoom after so many years of the pandemic. But in any case, I will see how it works. All right, so a little bit of introduction. This paper is investigating a thesis posed by Dilek Hussainzadeh Khan in her book Non-Ideal Kant's Non-Ideal Theory of Politics, and her recent paper Plot Twist on Charles Mill's influence on Kant studies. She claims that there is a systematic symbiosis between ideal and non-ideal elements of Kant's justice, which I call symbiosis thesis later. I am unfortunately not able to see my notes, so I will just say talk straight from my head. All right, so this is the main inspiration. Then the main point is to investigate the structure of the doctrine of right. So I'm actually focusing on one text. I have had some criticism over that. I think it makes sense to the point that Kant believed that this is his final say on the political theory or the structural structure of his justice on the state level. So this paper also focuses on Kant's idea structure on the state level. and I investigate the oppressive elements of this particular structure that are coexisting with liberal principles of innate right to freedom, which also entails equality, being one's own master, and a couple of other elements. I still have an optimistic or positive outcome of this paper, in the sense that I claim that Kant can inform our contemporary reflections on structural injustice with his oppressive elements. Mills is also here in as an inspiration, in the sense that he claimed that the entire contract theory that was introduced by many different philosophers in the times of modernity and enlightenment was a racial or racialized theory of justice, where the freedom and equality was meant only for the few, and the rest was involved in producing this freedom and equality and not necessarily enjoying it at all. All right, another and final introductory remark. My method is rather systematic than historical. I do not put Kant against the background of his contemporaries, or just a little bit, if so. I rather want to see how the analysis of his work can inform us of how structural injustice works, at least in this on the level of theory building, and therefore I will not speak of Ahenval or Rousseau or other thinkers. All right. The symbiosis thesis, as I said, I base it on Dilek Hussainzadeh-Ghan's paper in Kantian Review, and this is her quote: "To reiterate, Mill's symbiosis thesis establishes that Kant's writings on race and gender do not constitute an anomaly or a contradiction to his ideal principles. Rather, we ought to understand the Kantian system as a consistent exclusivist white egalitarianism, for the norm of personhood for Kant remains white and male." My thesis is not as strong in the sense that personhood itself is white and male, but the innate right to freedom only finds its full realization in the white male people of certain means. All right. Then when it comes to my account or my understanding of structural injustice, I am sourcing my inspiration from Iris Marion Jung and Charles Mills as a starting point, where structural injustice is not an issue of individual misconduct, but rather a feature of a structure of the social system, which is built in such a way that some people, some groups are more privileged than the others. It also can be devoid of responsibility, in the sense that there are no particular actors that can bear responsibility for changing the system, or if the responsibility is being considered, then it's the responsibility of all members of the particular system. Then also Charles Mills, who claimed that egalitarian political philosophy has this, bears this fatal flaw of being based on domination and oppression of non-white male people. So this is not only that the freedom and equality is not granted to everyone, it is also that freedom and equality of some is produced by oppression and domination of others. This is the relation. Now, my main inspiration when it comes to the account of structure and justice is Mauve McKeown and her new book, With Power Comes Responsibility. She recognizes, first of all, the element of power. So she builds on Iris Marion Jung's account, but she really reinforces it and builds her own theory by adding the element of power, which is, in my opinion, very important for my argument and for the concept of structural injustice itself. So she recognizes three different kinds of structural injustice. There is the one that is pure, the one that Iris Marion Jung thought of when the justice is unintended and unforeseeable, and there are no agents with the capacity to remedy it. Then there is also unavoidable structural injustice, when the unjust outcomes of structural processes are foreseeable, and there are agents that have the capacity to remedy the injustice, but they don't do it. And then we have also deliberate structural injustice, when the unjust outcomes are intended because powerful agents benefit from them. So they deliberately perpetuate the injustice by reproducing the system. Yeah, and here we really do have a lot of examples in terms of how Kant built his structure of justice, as I will show further, where we have the agents who benefit. McKeown herself bases her argument on, illustrates it with the example of sweatshop work, where the poor working conditions are to the benefit of the ones who reproduce these systems of oppression. All right. Now we go to Kant. As many of us certainly know, Kant's ideal theory is based on the universal principle of right, where we have the quote, "Any action is right if it can coexist with everyone's freedom in accordance with a universal law, or if on its maxim, the freedom of choice of each can coexist with everyone's freedom in accordance with the universal law." The problem with this quote is that the everyone is not meant as universal as we could read it today. The everyone from Kant's universal principle of right is going to be reduced to a small group of people once we go deeper into the system. What is important is that Kant's understanding of freedom as a right is connected to self-realization, a pursuit of one's own ends within the framework of equal freedom for everyone. There is also, but I will talk about it a bit later, the innate equality. We have innate right to freedom. And again, Kant's quote from the Metaphysics of Morals, Introduction to the Doctrine of Right. Freedom is the only original right belonging to every man by virtue of his humanity. The principle of innate freedom already involves the following authorizations. And here Kant claims innate equality as the first one, that is independence from being bound by others to more than one can in turn bind them. This has been interpreted mainly as the symmetry of obligations that we can put on one another within the structure of right, which is, of course, granted by the institutions within a state. What it also contains is that the will of others cannot be disposed of arbitrarily, but always on the basis of a contract, and always when it comes to public rights, we obey only the laws that we contribute to constituting, which means that the binding of laws is connected to our autonomy. Yeah, this is going to be more important later, but as we can see, the equality is already a promising principle under which no one should be oppressed or dominated. Yet, we have some elements of structural injustice that I will want to discuss today in my lecture. First, Kant's property conception, where property relations are fixed within a state, perpetuating and reproducing inequality in distribution of goods and resources. Then second, in his private rights, the status laws when it comes to marriage, where women are subjugated to the head of the household, and when it comes to servitude, where by a special contract it allows the man of the house master, to dispose of persons' powers. It is actually, in Kant's terms, not an arbitrary disposal, because it is a disposal of someone's powers according to the ends of the particular household. Nevertheless, the ends of the household are being determined by the housemaster. So, in a sense, it is according to his arbitrary will that we can only hope that is reasonable and good, that the powers of the servants are being disposed of. And third, in public right, we have the element where Kant introduces passive citizenship, where the vast majority of the state population is deprived of suffrage. One more remark here. I do not include the contract law within Kant, because it already assumes that the contractors have to have an equal standing for the contract to be valid. So in a sense, it assumes freedom and equality in entering a contract. Then the second remark is that we don't discuss the parental duties, once because we have an understanding that there is a certain inequality that is innate to those relations between parents and children, and therefore it would be much more complex now to introduce the entire discussion. I'm not saying that it's not that it is absolutely clear in Kant's philosophy how the parent-child relations should look like, or that is absolutely unproblematic. I just don't entail them in my discussion. I am discussing only adult sane people. All right, let's first focus on the private property. The rightful condition within a state is based on the introduction of public law, and institutions have no authority to modify the distribution of possession. The only function of the public law is to guarantee the property rights to the existing proprietors, giving them legal framework to manage and rid of their possessions through contracts, as well as to resolve disputes without resorting to violence. As we famously know, Kant does not introduce any redistribution duties within the state, and claims that the universal equality within a state when it comes to rights can be connected to the most severe inequality when it comes to possession. That means that Kant binds the existence of the state with the relations of possession that are, so to say, pre-political, and in this sense perpetuates the inequalities of the resources. Main resource for Kant in distribution of resources, and the main resource for Kant was land. All other possessions were somehow accidents to the substance of the land. All right, now we have the but. The but in this particular case is that the wealthy have acquired an obligation to commonwealth, since they owe their existence to an act of submitting to its protection and care, which they need in order to live. On this obligation, the state now bases its right to contribute what is theirs to maintaining their fellow citizens. So the state has a right, but not a duty, to tax the rich. And what is interesting about this quote in Kant is that there is a certain connection between the state's guarantee of private property with the state's right to impose taxation. So the ones that are well off and enjoy the protection of the state in their private property are also obliged to contribute to this state. So a lot of scholars, just to mention Rafik Hassan, just to mention Helga Varden, just to mention Sarah Holtman, but also Alice Pinheiro-Valla was writing about it. There is a certain possibility of granting redistribution of some resources within Kantian state. And more importantly, it is not based on needs. It is not based on the deprivation or the state in which the poor find themselves, but it is bound to the fact that legal protection enjoyed by private proprietors is connected to the universal will of the entire body of citizenry. So therefore, the wealthy have to contribute to upholding the body of citizenry, and the wealthy are actually obliged toward the state. So this is, I think, a good and interesting point if we are thinking about how international corporations should feel obliged towards the places where they draw their profits and where they enjoy their benefits. But also on the corporations, that's another interesting point. I have a friend from my project who is writing an entire Cambridge element on the Kant and corporation. So I'm not going to do any like spoilers. I just wanted to say that Kant mentions that there is no such thing as a foundation that has an internal right to enjoy its private property. Obviously, that is connected to the land and not to capital as in our times. But there is no such thing as private property rights granted to a non-physical person. That's very important thing, that private proprietors are always physical people. And when we have corporations like churches, foundations, and so on, their property is always conditional on the universal or united general will of the people within a state. That's why property and state law are so interconnected in Kant's political philosophy. All right. Then we move to the status rights. First, we have marriage. It's a very problematic part of Kant's philosophy of right, and a lot of previous commentators would just say, oh, well, status rights or rights of the household, they are actually Kant copying Justinian legislation, Roman law, just writing it in his own language, but basically doing the same thing. It doesn't matter. I don't think we can do it anymore, which was proven also in a brilliant Kant element on Kant's theory of labor, recently published by Jordan Pascoe, who writes that Kant develops, and I quote, his rightful frame for the rights to a person akin to a right to a thing. And why he does it, he carves out a space between enslavement and wage labor, a category that protects the exclusivity of independence and civil equality while ensuring ongoing entitlement to the labor that reproduces this independence. What is very important here is that in marriage, there is the right of the husband to be the head of the household and therefore to dispose of his wife's powers within the domestic labor. So that his independence on the public arena and in his business affairs can be protected by ridding him of his household chores. There is a very interesting paper by Martin Sticker published in 2020 where he claims that different sex marriage, according to Kant's theory of marriage, is actually not possible. It's only the same-sex marriage that is possible within Kantian framework, because marriage conception within Kant assumes a contract between equal parties. And on one hand, it is a progressive element within Kant that he says that wife and husband are equal parties, and it is connected to Kant's theory of sexuality and how sexual conduct actually rids us of our personality. And yeah, let's not go into details there. But on the other hand, while this is an equal parties contract, a wife within a household is always subjugated to the head of the household and I don't want to say exploited, but I will, and exploited for the purpose of upholding the household's ends, which means employed in domestic labor. What is more, there is a certain possession of a spouse that is written into Kant's marital law, and there is this quote of retrieving one's partner as if it is a thing, if he or she happens to escape. The problem here is that it is usually not the husband who would happen to escape within a household, but let's leave it for maybe discussion, and let's go further with the servitude in Kant's conception. Servitude in Kant's conception of justice allows by special contract to dispose of persons' powers that would be arbitrary in the sense that these powers are being disposed by the person who determines the ends to which those powers should be used. And in this sense, there is an arbitrary will of the headmaster that is also a figure of reason in Kant's terms, but still remains a physical person. Therefore, a servitude contract is a very different one, meaning they do not have the freedom that a contractor within a contract law has once he or she fulfills what is written in the contract. There is no such thing as fulfillment of the contract. There is only the time framework where the contract is being executed, and in this sense, it is like a temporally or temporary slavery in a sense, because it's not slavery in sensu stricta, in the sense that there is the personality, also legal personality of the person who is a servant within a household. On the other hand, though, the rights and duties of the servant and of the house masters are completely different, and there is absolutely no equality between these two people. Now, there is a but here, in the sense that the dependency of domestic workers does not constitute a private issue for Kant, but is a necessary element of the structure of economy. And this, according to Jordan Pascoe, is a great insight by Kant, where he does recognize that the domestic work is part of the state economy, and that we need this work in order to pursue other ends within economy. In our current conditions, meaning in the global capitalist system, domestic work is usually invisible and due to subjected to precarious working conditions, or it is an unpaid work. So at least that's what we have in Kant, that it is included. Now, the second problem here is that we cannot expect, and this is a comment to some Kantian feminists, we cannot expect that women in our current society will work themselves up by hiring a domestic worker that will replace them in this care and domestic labor, because it's obvious that not everyone can work themselves up. First of all, not every element of care work can be further delegated to someone else. Care work is also work of love, and I don't think that we would end up delegating all the parental duties, for example, in order to be independent. On the other hand, the parental duties are disproportionately put on women, especially the so-called emotional work and household management. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this is what Jordan Pascal puts a special stress on, is that the domestic labor is very often delegated to racialized groups, or to groups of people that are worse off within the structure of the society, subjected to precarious conditions of labor with or without work contracts, and therefore working oneself up by women in this particular context very often means pushing these tasks down the chain of oppression within the racialized society. Excuse me. All right. So that's how what we have to say about dependent labor. Now, the last one is passive citizenship. Passive citizenship is an element of Kant's public right, where he claims that in Metaphysics of Morals, in the Doctrine of Right, in his final form of political philosophy, that a true republic should be a system representing people, and therefore some citizens, or true citizens, are the ones who participate in law giving within a state. Now, the problem is that the true citizen, the free, equal, and independent citizen, is also a person who is of certain financial means, i.e., okay, maybe not, it's a person that can can have their subsistence guaranteed by not by their labor, but by their possession. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a rich person, but it has to be a person who participates in market economy. So there is this 2-3 examples. Let's take the hairdresser. The hairdresser is someone who comes from home to home, doesn't own a workshop, and does provide service labor. The wig maker produces something that is participating then on the market. So even if the wig maker is not really making much money, it's still he still is a proprietor and has its own means of subsistence. So that's the difference. There's an entire discussion on what is the difference between dependent and independent labor in Kant's conception of state, right, and justice. I cannot go much into details, but in the end, if we look at the empirical conditions of Kant's times, the independent labor, the independent citizens were the citizens who were either in possession of land or having their own workshops, or state employees. Because then if they are dependent only on the state, if they were state officers, then they were still independent of the arbitrary will of another citizen, because state itself is not or doesn't have ideally arbitrary will. It only has united will of the entire citizens' body. So this active citizen has to be acting from his own choice in community with others, and depends on his depends on his own business, and not on arrangements made by another. And other citizens or members of the state lack civil personality. Their existence, as it were, only inherence, and they do not have the right to participate in universal law giving. So their innate equality of being bound symmetrically with different obligations is not or cannot be truly fulfilled. So that's the final element of structural oppression and domination. As we can see, it refers first to the poor, the group that are marginalized, second to the non-male people, and to the ones that are bound by contracts of servitude, which means the ones who are employed in domestic labor, and third, the ones who are not active citizens, who are therefore bound within a structure of economy to the arbitrary will of another. As we can see, Kant binds political power with economic power, binds political power and economic power with gender, and also reproduces the inequalities when it comes to wealth, so that it's much harder to think of some kind of emancipation of the disadvantaged groups within society that is obviously divided into differently privileged people. Now, there is one condition on which Kant allows passive citizenship. It is that everyone, except women, obviously, because they are naturally passive, anyone should be able to work oneself up. So if we are, and Kant was actually a private tutor at some point in his life, so he was a passive citizen himself. According to his own theory, he was dependent on the arbitrary will of his housemaster. If anyone can work themselves up, so keep studying and then become a public teacher funded by the state and therefore an independent citizen, then there is absolutely no problem in the universal principles of right that grant freedom and equality to everyone. So this is the one and only condition under which Kant actually allows that empirically and in the real life, the vast majority of state members will be disenfranchised, disempowered, and therefore oppressed and dominated by the arbitrary will of others. All right, so that's my gloom picture of Kant. I will still want to give some hope and provide the valuable lessons that I think we can draw from Kant's symbiotic structure that provides symbiosis between universal egalitarian principles and particular exclusionary rights that oppress and dominate others. First of all, if the property relations are fixed within the state, then the rich still can and should be taxed for the purpose of the poor, since they owe their prosperity to the protection of the state, and they owe their prosperity to the people of the state. And I think this is a very important point. Second, when it comes to status, Kant does recognize domestic labor and care work as the necessary part of economic system, which, according to Pascal, I didn't study Marx so thoroughly. Marx does not really see himself. So here Kant is much more helpful in analyzing our current system than Marx himself. And then when it comes to passive citizenship, even if we have the possibility of someone working themselves or their way up from passive condition to an active one, we have to understand that anyone within a structure that is unjust never means everyone, and the sole possibility of singular emancipation doesn't make the entire structure non-oppressive. It doesn't make it just. if someone, so like if someone can go from a shoe cleaner to a millionaire, doesn't mean that the entire system based on the singular examples of success is not somehow wrong if it oppresses and if it oppresses large groups of people, if large groups of people are subject to domination, arbitrary will of others who are better off. So I will just read my conclusions because it's been a long talk. I'm sorry, it's because of my current life conditions that there is a snoring sick dog on my lap and my children are running around. This is just how to say, the human condition of a working mother, as it were. But I am very excited to hear some feedback and some comments and some questions, maybe. All right. Let's go to conclusions. Kant's justice is reserved to white male members of state who are independent and therefore possess full citizenship. Only then, as co-legislators, can they truly enjoy innate freedom as absence of oppression and domination. Other members of a state whose existence is merely an inherence are subject to domination and vulnerable to oppression from the ones who possess full citizenship. Kant's theory perpetuates structural injustice through juridical measures of state constitution, domination, and inequality, and are written into it as though they were determined by the nature. Kant's justice is exemplary, therefore, for the purpose of Mill's symbiosis thesis. The structural injustice written into his theory is nevertheless informative of the contemporary forms of oppression and domination within, and here, Western liberal democracies on the juridical level. Although the emancipation of the underprivileged, women, people of color, and the poor cannot be fully achieved only by juridical measures, and that's, a very important point. We must first recognize the injustice on the constitutional level, which coexist with ideal principles of the Constitution very often. Freedom, equality, and so on and so forth. The pursuit of happiness as well. To be able to turn the attention to the social and cultural sources of oppression and domination. So let's first fix this legal structure, then we can somehow proceed. So that's me. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Eva. It was wonderful. Before going to the Q&A, I just wanted to ask you if you want to have a short break or
5 minutes would be great. Thank you so much.
So see you in time. everyone or anyone can raise her virtual hand. Esteban.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting your talk. And I was wondering about this issue. I mean, obviously, in the doctrine of right, for example, as you show in his doctrine regarding marriage and servitude, Kant is actually kind of legitimizing and accepting oppression, right? But I was wondering about the relationship between this, like we may call it, is applied political philosophy, and the more universal theoretical principles, like in the universal principle of right, like where he defends equal freedom for everyone. So is the blind spot where he's blinded about actual justice more, not more in his application of the universal principles when he goes through in the doctrine right through issues like marriage and servitude? Because of course we may now see that what who he included in everyone was limited, but the theoretical reasons for everyone to have equal freedom based on his doctrines of personhood, ends in themselves, etc., applied theoretically, obviously also covered the oppressed, right? So I was wondering if the inconsistency is not just, rather than in the theoretical level, it's in how he applies it to actual institutions, social institutions like marriage or contracts of servitude, etc. So that probably we could say that there's more to be rescued in his theoretical principles, but that he was blind to whom everyone included because of, an oppressive conception of who are the equals in a society.
Should I go ahead and answer right away? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that's a very good question. And that's a question of an entire debate that is going on right now between those who say there is an ideal Kant and there is non-ideal Kant, and therefore we should focus on the ideal, rescue what can be rescued, and use it for contemporary purposes. The problem with this, in my opinion, the problem with this approach is that it doesn't see the context in which these theories exerted such an influence on our current societies that we may accept that the state's democratic principles written into the Constitution are enough to secure the real freedom and the real equality for all. And I think that the history of these philosophies, because I am not thinking only about Kant, I'm thinking about Locke, I'm thinking about Rousseau, showed us already that this is not enough. And as much as we, and I do still endorse and appreciate the ideal principles by Kant, I think they are entangled into this structure where the application to the Kantian cultural context, but also other cultural contexts, deem these ideal and beautiful principles obsolete in the sense that they do not do the work. And therefore, if we think or look at how Kant does apply these principles in this non-ideal way, can shed light on how we fail to grant this equal freedom and this equality in the sense of enjoying the freedom to pursue one's ends and to be free from the arbitrary will of another. And I mean, by this I mean a different will than what is the legislative power of the state. So it is obviously the case that these are beautiful principles, but they didn't save us from producing even the most how to say beautifully structured and well-praised societies have elements of structural oppression, and more so these that are famed for being the land of the free. Therefore, I decided to go this maybe a little bit newer way of certain scholars like Jordan Pascal, like Dilek Hussein Zadegan, like Wapinglu Adler, like Elvira Basevich, and many others, Nuria Sanchez Madrid, Alessandro Pinzani, and so on and so forth, who want to stay with Kant, but actually investigate the non-ideal theory in order to learn something for our contemporary conditions.
Thank you very much. Can I make a quick follow-up? Just very quick.
Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. No, obviously, I think it's very worth it to look at what actually Kant does in his Doctrine of Right, and how the ideal principles kind of break down in a very non-ideal way. But I'm still wondering about the theoretical question that the ideal principles are much more revolutionary than his, let's call it, sort of hypocritical, probably not on purpose, probably just because he's assuming that everyone is a white male that has a land property, etc. But that maybe the actual principles could still be part of the basis of a revolutionary philosophy. I'm not saying complete, because there's the second question that maybe when you actually think of trying to apply the ideal principles in a real society, in a real way, maybe the principles themselves fall short, and we need something more than even those ideal principles. Like, you could not just apply them, given that I think you made very clear that the material conditions that allow for certain freedoms already include oppression, and then we need to think of these other things that are not in the ideal principles. So I think there's like probably a complicated dialectic that in one way is applying them in a less than ideal way, and in another sense, even the ideal principles, though as revolutionary as they may be, if you were to apply them more faithfully and with a more inclusive everyone, would probably fall short. So the analysis of the application can also serve to make us rethink even the most ideal principles in the most theoretical way too. What would you think about that?
I understand your concern. So I am less and less hopeful that ideal principles themselves can suffice in building a just society. So I'm going against this entire tradition of Rawlsian political philosophy here, and saying we need to investigate the non-ideal conditions and adjust the structure so that it is revolutionary, emancipatory, and so on. That doesn't mean that Kant and his insights about people being ends in themselves, universal respect, are not, in a sense, achievements of the history of philosophy. I'm not saying that. I'm still a Kantian, maybe a critical Kantian, but still a Kantian in the sense that I still buy into the idea of innate freedom and in themselves. Yeah, so that's definitely the case. I am not very much into calling the entire procedure the application. I think it's a different thing, and that's part of my argument, that it's a different thing. It's not just the application that he fails and he has blind spots or something. I think there's something else going on, but maybe we can leave it. But in general, as I said, I started like as an ideal Kantian, and then I kind of had to go and see the messy parts, and it changed my perspective. But I still think that Kant taught us some when it comes to what freedom or equality is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ewa. Efrain.
Okay, so I hope this works because my computer went off. So thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it. I guess I have two questions. One is a follow-up of the conversation that you just had about ideal and non-ideal theory. And my question is whether your work and the work of others you mentioned is not actually putting into question the distinction itself between ideal and non-ideal theory. It's a way of questioning the distinction itself. I wanted to hear what you think about it. If you still want to maintain the distinction for some reason, or you just want to drop it. And the second question is more of a systematic kind of question about how you. Sorry, are you listening? Is everything okay? Okay. So the second question is about structural injustice, and I wanted to see how you understand this structural thing. Sometimes you say the oppression, sometimes you say injustice. That's not as important, I think. But do you think that in structural oppression, there's no imputability of the oppressive actions or the unjust actions? So you gave like a couple of characterizations of structural justice, and then with Mathieu you made some distinctions. But I didn't see, at least I didn't notice in those distinctions whether there is like a strong thesis claiming that structural injustice is not imputable to any one person. And I find that very problematic. I think even structural justice is imputable, must be imputable. But, I just wanted to know what you think about this. Thank you. And welcome to the Instituto, by the way. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. These are both great questions. About the distinction ideal and non-ideal, this is still a running distinction in the scholarship. That's true. And therefore, I'm using this language. But obviously, the ones that the authors that I mentioned, they want to drop it. They want to drop it in the sense that let's just read Kant as a whole. Let's not accept Pinglo Adler doesn't do it. She actually introduces the levels of abstraction for her own purposes. I still believe in the levels of abstraction within Kant, and therefore there is much more general or universal, and then there is the much more particular. So I am still on the threshold, sitting as it may on the fence, in the sense that I use the terminology, but I also try to implement in my argument a reading that would drop the distinction. So say, okay, we have this, but we also have this, and this comes together, and it actually functions within a symbiosis. So this is a symbiosis of innate freedom and structural oppression. This all goes together. So terminologically, I am not dropping the distinction yet. I think it's a process. We thinkers are always in the process, right? But I kind of think that the distinction has often been made to dismiss Kant's so-called non-ideal writings as non-relevant to the discussion, and therefore not really bringing about an in-depth interpretation of his philosophy that would give justice to the philosopher himself. So it's actually something that Kant wouldn't be happy about either, although we don't know. I don't think he's gonna come out of his grave for his birthday, so who knows what he would say. So thanks for this remark, because it makes me think more about how I'm speaking about these things. Now, the second thing about is structural injustice imputable? So Iris Marion Jung says it's not, in the sense that there are no real perpetrators, because she leaves power out. McKeon introduces power back in to her account of structural injustice, and therefore she can claim that there are forms of structural injustice that are totally imputable. Yeah, there is this unavoidable structural injustice, and there is this one that is actually done on purpose. And the one that is done on purpose is the worst kind, and it is totally imputable. It makes the entire groups guilty of reproducing something that serves them. Yeah. So that's also why I like her account much more than Young's account. Although, yeah, Young also left us with some unfinished writing. So who knows where she would end up with. What she would end up with, but Kian, I think it's a pretty recent book, but she really very much consolidates the previous work on structural injustice, and very nicely introduces the aspect of power and the aspect of imputability and responsibility as well. So I believe that there are forms of structural injustice where we don't have the true responsibility, because we would have to say the responsible is the system that is not changed, and but there are no actual group that could be imputed with responsibility. So there are groups that are benefiting from it, but there is no one who can be made responsible for it. That's the problem. But there are also the forms that are absolutely imputable, as you told, as you used this word. Okay. I hope I answered. Yeah.
Omar.
Thank you so much for the talk. I have two questions, but I'm going to just make one because I need to translate the other. So okay. The first is that I was wondering that if you consider marriage, at least in Kant, as an instance of domination, because that triggers some questions to me, at least. I want to develop some comments. For example, it seems that marriage is a special relation, or at least a particular relation, because according to Kant, I am free if I am not coerced by another in the town, so I can set my own ends and try to realize them. But when I'm married, sometimes I need to ask first instead of just act. No, I need to ask permission to the other person. So that seems that there is a kind of dependency, or I make the other an authorization to me because I need to ask first, just that example, no? So if I need to ask first, I'm not only enforceable by the other person, but I also need to perform some actions. Like I need to offer food to the house. I cannot abandon my partners, or I cannot, I don't know, other rights that the couple has rights to claim to another person. So this seems a contradiction with the main idea of independence. But at the same time, these kind of relations are legit, they are regular in some sense. So it seems that it's not an instance of domination, but instead an instance of legitimacy dependency relations, where self-care is involved, or where some duties are involved in the relation. So that's bringing me the question, because if they are consistent, if the notion of marriage as depicts Kant in the Philosophy of Life is consistent with his own system, these examples as marriage, or at least the relation between parents and child, are not examples of structural injustice, because they are like protecting the liberty from any persons that are involved. And the second question, but that's my first question. Then I realized the second one. So thank you. Hopefully it's understandable.
Thanks. That's also a great question. But do I understand correctly that you are suggesting that within marriage as a contract, husband is also dependent on the wife?
Yeah, I mean, even that's the question, if actually it's a contract, because at least in Kant, marriage is not a contract, it's a status relation. So many others has interpreted this relation as a fiduciary relationships, where I have obligations, but also duties with the other person. No?
Yeah.
And sometimes these duties are read as care duties to the other. So it seems like very different image that you presented and other people has.
Well, yeah, also the housemaster has a duty not to use up the powers of the servant. That's nice. But the servant doesn't have really the rights much more than that against the housemaster. So there is the asymmetry of rights and obligations within these relations, and the asymmetry when it comes to rights and obligations goes like that. Within marriage, there should be actually symmetry. There are rights and obligations because we give each other our bodies so that we can get ourselves back. So it's very complex because it's connected to Kant's theory of sexuality. And that is not my area of expertise. I can refer you to upcoming book by Martin Brecher, who has spent years and years on that, and he is an expert, definitely. But there is one aspect of it, so like we have rights and obligations towards like taking care of each other and giving each other our sexual organs and using them. And in this particular sense, these are equal parties that enter such a contract. And then when we have the status relations, there is a problem that when it comes to the obligations of wife and the obligations of husband, they both do have rights and obligations. So wife has a right to be protected, and husband has a right to have his house chores done by the wife unless she actually delegates it further. to someone else because she is a woman of means. Kant mentions this situation as well. The problem is that she is under the legal protection of the husband, and in this sense, she doesn't have an equal legal personhood. And in this sense, because she is under his protection, she is under this legal protection, she is she's dominated because she is not able to decide by herself on her property, on her body, on many different issues. This is the problem with this status relation, because she's not a legal subject for the state. For the state, the legal subject is the household and the housemaster. Now, the parental relation is something opposite of servitude, because the kid has mostly rights and the parent has mostly obligations. Yeah. And with servitude, the servant has mostly obligations, and the parent, housemaster, has mostly rights. So, and I am not going into detail because I think I need to do more studies on that. But I think that within these status relations, these two particular places where we are talking about domestic work and care work, we have a very valuable lesson to learn from Kant, and that is that this work is part of what constitutes the independence and freedom of the housemaster, which means that the independence and freedom of the real citizens who participate in universal law giving is produced and reproduced by those who give the care work. So the structural injustice of this part of Kant's philosophy that I recognize, but it doesn't have to be like, it's probably also a matter of culture, lays in the fact that there are asymmetries of binding others in the structure of obligations. Yeah, the wife has less rights and more obligations, and the same is with the servant. The wife has at least this one right less, that she has no right to represent herself legally as a citizen of a state. And she is subjected to the housemaster in her own business, in her like money management and whatnot, that she can enjoy the protection of the man. And it was actually a good thing maybe for women in Kant's age, and very nice of him and whatnot, is a different thing. I am talking about freedom and equality for everyone, which means it's the ability to will and realize one's own ends, and not the ends of the household or the ends of their husbands. So that's the problem with the freedom of realizing one's own ends and one's own scheme of life. The same is with the servant, who is like, and at least when it comes to the time he, disposes of in his day, most of the time is not realizing his own ends, but the ends of the household.
Thanks so much.
I don't know if it in any.
No, it was, thank you. It was illuminating.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's great.
Axel.
And gracias. Thank you so much for the talk. I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot. So this is great. The positive proposal is that we need to do something about these things, right? But my question is, how are we going to go about it? Like, we can just like go each one of them and go like, well, okay, you have fix the issues that come from private property. We got to fix the issues from the different sorts of status differences, and we should address the issues related to I don't remember what the third one was. I forgot. But in any case, but that would be like doing a little bit of a whack-a-mole thing, right? That just addressing the issues as they come up. Can there be another option, like to try to find out why these issues came up? Where did these three sources of limitations of freedom within Kantian theory come from, so that we can address them before they arise, like before people start thinking that, oh, maybe we have to make an exception here and accept some inequalities here because of blah, 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 blah. Is there something like farther up in the abstraction hierarchy that these three things have in common, and that would explain why Kant made reservations for them? That is my question.
Thanks so much. It's a very, very good question. I don't have an answer. No, I have something to say. Yeah. The thing is, so there is this whole idea of non-ideal theory building, which means let's start to look at, or let's look at the society through this framework of structural injustice, of like oppression and domination, which are, what is this, who is on the different strata of society. And this was, in a sense, performed by Charles Mills in his Black Radical Kantianism. I am not totally sold on his idea, and therefore I really don't have like a perfect answer. It would be just nice to like, let's just sit down and rewrite the entire social structure, but this social structure is already there, and we have the ideal principles written into most constitutions, and it doesn't really do anything. And then there are some ideas. There are some ideas like UBI is one strain of these ideas, universal basic income. The other idea is this capabilities approach by Martha Nussbaum. Another idea is what else? Sandel's theory of merit is kind of like another critical approach that says let's actually empower and grant respect to the blue collar Schicht, part of society. Let's not say that like anyone can work themselves up. Let's give a decent life to everyone, right? But maybe let's start with those that are the most oppressed and disenfranchised within a society. So let's focus on the losers within a system, and then we will see what's not working, where it's not working. If we have to rethink the entire structure, even if we do, we still cannot, unless we do perform some very successful revolution, haven't heard of one. We really don't have the means to actually implement once and for all a just structure. I think it's a work in progress. It's a process. It's a process of becoming more sensitive towards the structures of oppression and domination, and to give voices to the representatives of these groups, to hear stories, to work with testimonial injustice and like epistemic injustice and all that, it's much more complex, therefore I don't have an answer. How to make the world a better place, like one day at a time, I guess. I would say that's all I can say, because I think what the position of philosophers today, as opposed to those Enlightenment thinkers, is so much worse, in the sense that we know we cannot just fix it by writing an ideal theory that would just beautifully save everyone.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Okay, hope so.
Esteban.
Well, just taking the opportunity, I didn't see any other hands up, so I said, well, I might just ask another question. But I was just a little reflection on the things we've been talking about, and coming back to my original question, like in moral and political philosophy, at the most theoretical level, we want kind of some principles that explain or account for things like injustice, immorality, etc. And I was thinking, like, for instance, since Kant actually, when he talks about equal rights for everyone, he's not including everyone. But when we criticize him for not including everyone, is because we do think, like, for instance, the oppression of women is a real thing. It's really a form of social injustice. And beyond the intuition that we can all share, the intuition that it is unfair, the unequal gender roles, for instance, well, we need a theoretical foundation as well, or at least part of philosophy attempts to do that. And I think that is the place where the kind of more theoretical Kant I'm not saying that he gives the final right answer, but he seems to be contributing to that as well, beyond what he says about the actual institution of marriage, right? Like in that case, for instance, of marriage, I think that thankfully, at least laws of marriage have regarding marriage have changed in many countries, and we need many more changes. That's far from enough, because just changing the laws doesn't change, historical patriarchal structures and forms of relationship that, just keep reproducing themselves at a social level beyond whatever the written laws say. Anyway, so going back to my original point, I was thinking that Kant, in his more theoretical framework, when he's trying to give foundations for political and moral philosophy, he seems there to be one of the main contributors to think about what is fair or unfair when we apply it beyond his own limits. Well, that was just my little reflection on that topic. I think it's very worth it to check what Kant actually said about marriage, for instance, and to criticize him and to see the limits of what he said. But since we're criticizing him, we are assuming that, of course, he did not include in equal rights for everyone as he should have, and that means that there's some theoretical level where we can actually justify that he was wrong.
All right, yeah, that's a challenge, but there is a problem with that, because I don't know how much we think or project into Kant of what we ourselves would want to read out there. And it's not bad that we do it unless we actually think that this is Kant himself, because we are also in the process of changing the social understandings of roles and whatnot. Like there is like a process again here, like Kant wouldn't want to call it moral progress, I don't know if it is a moral progress, but in any case, there is certain process. Like if we call it progress, then we will say, okay, it's getting better. But I'm not sure if this progress is a linear thing or if it happens at all. Because, there are different accounts of the history of humanity and how in different cultures we saw genders. Race was something that has been invented in the 18th century and 17th and 18th century and was used politically to justify a lot of things. And then we are still using this category because unfortunately it is informing us about what functions within the structures of society. But for Kant, yes, everybody deserves the same respect, but women are not really moral beings. There is a hierarchical account of races. Who knows what Kant really thought about when he thought about personhood? So obviously we think a lot into those texts. There are, though, I think, good texts. That's why we are still speaking about Kant. Otherwise, we would just, throw him into the bin of history of philosophy, something that was there but is not really important anymore for us. And that's why that's the thing with the great thinkers, that they can inspire us today. But I think there is also this. I'm gonna have to finish soon. There is this threat or this danger of looking into ideal principles for solutions. We have the principle of utility or this account of capabilities, or like universal account of human needs and whatnot. And I think they're always partial answers. They're always showing us only part of the reality. And as much as I am still using Kant's or Kantian, or like at least this Judeo-Christian Kantian idea of human dignity, and although there are also like interpreters of Kant that says Kant and dignity, it's a different thing that everybody says. But it's like, if you go deep enough into Kant research, and you don't know anything anymore. But I'm just saying, I totally buy into those ideas, right? I really totally buy into the idea of universal human respect. But I don't think Kant really did the same with these concepts as we are doing. Now, very often, therefore, I use another distinction, which is Kant's idea or concept or conception, and then Kantian. And Kant inspired, and actually the project I'm in is like Kantian. Let's rethink Kantian categories of kingdom of ends, of the universal formula of humanity and whatnot. So I obviously invite using these concepts because they can be fruitful, but like being true to the historical research and to the proper reading, understanding of Kant's text, I would say we have to include then other parts as well. So I think that's another issue. I think there is a certain responsibility towards teachers when it comes to teaching Kant. And that's what like Robert Bernasconi pointed to a lot of times in the many texts. There is this brilliant text, will the real Kant please stand up? Let's not show Kant only as this great philosopher who taught us about human dignity. Let's show that he was also entangled in certain understanding of social and political relations of his times. Let's show him what he wrote about, show them what he wrote about lazy islanders and about, it's actually in the groundwork, so it's not really hard to look at. Let's show what he thought about marriage and whatnot, just to, as Lou Adler says, to look at the thinker who obviously was a great thinker on the eye level and not put him on the pedestal. So that's all. Like I'm with you because I'm in Kant scholarship, so I have to buy into it to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Eva. I just
Thank you
have
very much.
a very brief question, which is kind of more personal, maybe. So, considering all of this, what should we do as philosophers in order not to make the same mistakes of the past? And I'm thinking about your or the project you were cooperating in with newcomers. So if you want, I don't know, to use it an example, it will be great.
Newcomers, the film, you mean?
Yeah, so what I mean is just like giving space to people to speak about it, not just.
So that's why I also mentioned before the epistemic justice. And one thing is obviously that's great to analyze some ideal principles. The other is, I think we should, but this is just my personal evolution of a human being. How about we focus also on the stories and the stories that are told of by those who are not on the top of the pyramid of power, and that's a good starting point for building a non-ideal theory. But I think talking about common humanity might be more fruitful if we focus on the stories, because there is, I guess, I hope, some common human experience, right? And there is Kant's common humanity, and even though he couldn't find this common humanity in women and non-white people, I think we can if we talk long enough, I think we can find common humanity. That's also the source of solidarity very often and of social change. But this is non-Kantian. That's
It's Eva.
An eclectic evolution, a process. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Eva, for your time and for this wonderful talk.
Thank you so much for having me in your Zoom room. I'm really impressed how many people attended the seminar, and I'm humbled that I couldn't provide more professional working conditions for myself, but it still was a great pleasure to talk about my work.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
All right then.
Yeah.
Goodbye. See you next time, hopefully. Somewhere in Zoom.
In Bonn, probably.